Professor Barrett, when I was introducing this program, I promised our viewers that we would say something about Sartre, and I think that before we come to an end, I really do want to ask you if we can move on to him just for a moment. Although Sartre has become, as it were, the most famous existentialist, his is the name that most people associate with existentialism, he's not as original a thinker as Heidegger, is he? But nevertheless, he has made a contribution. What would you characterize as being Sartre's main contribution?
Well, there are a number of ways which characterize that, but I'd like to contrast them first. Perhaps that might point the direction which his contribution has come. You see, Sartre's big book, his major philosophical work, and I personally think, by the way, some of his novels and plays are more important than any of his philosophical writing, but I think he's still a philosopher of considerable brilliance. But his major work is called Being and Nothingness. It's a gigantic misnomer. It's not about being, and it's not about nothingness. Sartre doesn't have much of a feeling for being. Whatever one may object to in Heidegger, one has to acknowledge that man is really saturated with the sense of being in some sense. What Sartre's book is about is really the kind of melodrama of two Cartesian consciousnesses. And naturally they're Cartesian because he's French. Every Frenchman is a Cartesian, I think, when he's pushed far enough. And these two consciousnesses never understand each other. That is, they are two subjectivistic minds who misinterpret each other. I, as subject, impose upon you and convert you into an object and so on, and you reciprocate. And so this fiendish dialogue of misrepresentation goes on, and misunderstanding and so forth. In the end, it becomes impossible for us to communicate sincerely. This big book of Sartre is really a book on the problem of sincerity, which is the staple, I think, of French literature, from Montaigne right through Molière and Proust and so on. Now, but to come to you see, Sartre's then most famous positive doctrine is its notion of liberty, and it's the doctrine which actually, I think, caught on most in the public eye. That as human beings, we have an absolute and total freedom. Nothing prevents us at a certain moment from doing some very precipitous and dangerous thing.
I am in the literal sense free now to take all my clothes off or go and jump out of the window, or I can actually do these things. Yes. And one thing Sartre keeps stressing is that by pretending that I am not free to do them, I'm falsifying the reality of my own situation.
Yes. So I stand on a precipice at any moment and I can hurl myself off it. And in this sense, the characteristic of this total freedom is that it's vertiginous or dizzying. And he carries through this metaphor of standing on a cliff and having this dizzy sense of being able to cast yourself down. Nothing prevents you.
Isn't he right to dramatize in this way the fact that the realities of choice which we have in life and the realities of freedom that we have in life are in fact much greater than we ourselves wish to face for most of the time?
Except now, here's where you see, I think, Heidegger has an insight which is beyond him in this respect, because the individual who hurls himself into this precipitous choice may, in tearing off in that sudden direction, remain utterly as blind as when he started. You see, now, it's rather curious that Heidegger's view of freedom is a very quiet one and subtle and soft. Our fundamental freedom is the freedom, if we can manage it, to become open, to let truth happen. And most of us in our lives are shut off in our personal lives in one way or another, doesn't matter which, from truth in our dealings with other people. We have resistances which can't be breached and so on. But sometimes there is a fissure in this wall that shuts us off, and we are able to let be. We no longer seek to compel. You see, the whole of the later Heidegger is really a prolonged attack on the will to power as characterizing Western civilization.
An attack on this urge we have to dominate nature,
and even,
dominate our environment.
And even dominate our own personal lives or dominate other people.
The view being that you only really understand reality when in some sense you submit yourself to it.